And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry about that little bit of a delay there getting started. Make you listen to the elevator music more than once. But here we are. We are good and ready to go. And I was having a few little chat room problems, so I'm going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. And the old-fashioned way is I'm going to watch the chats and just make sure I take those questions and get what is needed there. And so, looking forward to your biblical, theological, and worldview questions here today. It'll be always a delight to have you, and I'll get it one way or another. So, here's the deal. I do not have today's. No, I don't have the old questions, so I'm going completely on today's questions. That means it is wide open today for you to ask questions. And I am going to watch the chats, and we're going to make that happen. And Nathan got tied up in another meeting, so he's, not helping me out there. But I'm going to go back and forth between the chats on YouTube and on Worshipify, and we are going to make it happen. And so let's see what we've got here. We've got Scott first in the room there. Cliff's with us. Good to see you. Bruce, Indiana. Glad to see you. Carlos, I didn't get to your question last night, did I? And Nathan's working on it. Okay, he's going to get me fixed up. So there, I'll get your question in here in just a moment. Good to see you. Washington State, and welcome. Ooh, Indiana, -9. Feels like -33. Did you, by the way, hear that the guy that came up with the feels like temperature? What do you call that? Anyway. He recently died. Yeah, he was 84, but felt like 63. That was a joke. Anyway, glad you're here, and so many of you are in bitter cold weather today. I'm glad so far there hasn't, at least that I've seen, hasn't been electrical outages, because that could easily be such a disaster. Through there. So, Carlos. Okay, yes, here we go. I'm going to start with Carlos's question here this morning and get that right on. And I got it now. Everything is there. Feels like -15 in Poca. I bet the dots are jumping around today, aren't they, in Poca? So, here we go. Programming note, before I get to Carlos's question. Programming note is that tomorrow night, Christmas Eve, it'll be 5 o'clock for our candlelight Christmas Eve service. Would love to see you, your family, join us in your living room, in your kitchen, wherever it is, out on the patio, enjoying some crisp, cool weather. Wherever you listen, you can get you a little candle and turn off the lights at the appropriate time and light the candle and have a nice little Christmas Eve service with us. And I'll share the Christmas story. I got to thinking last night, it is, this is the 30th time that I have done the Christmas story by memory. I've been doing it 30 years now. This will be number 30 tonight. So that's good. Ooh. Illinois, there is a power outage. She says 4 degrees in Illinois. We had power out last night till about an hour ago, so obviously on now. But that's good. Yeah, with no power, it could be dangerous. But Gainesville, Florida has got a balmy 58 degrees. Good for you. And it's not bad in Taos either. I think we're at, upper 20s right now. I think we only got to about 24, 25 last night. So that's warm for here. But just, I don't know, 20 miles away, 30 miles away, that's when it gets into the bitter cold. So we just missed it. And we are glad we did. Okay, now to Carlos in Conroe, Texas. I like Carlos. He, a pastor for many years, came to Right Division and had the guts as a pastor to accept Right Division and get his theology right. That's hard to do, I know, as a pastor. It is very hard to do because nobody in your network, in your circle, in your denomination, whatever, nobody wants to touch you with a 39.5-foot pole, as they say in the Grinch, and yet Carlos did it. Good for you. Carlos's question: if Peter was preaching a different gospel, Galatians 2:7, which we'll pull up here in just a moment. If Peter was preaching a different gospel, was he under the curse of Paul? Let's put these two together. First of all, Peter preaching a different gospel. Well, it does say right here, contrariwise, when they, the leaders at Jerusalem, saw that the gospel of the uncircumcision was committed unto me, as the gospel of the circumcision was unto Peter. And so clearly they were preaching a different gospel. Now, I know that our evangelical brethren would say, no. This is the gospel to the circumcision, or the gospel to the uncircumcision. They would not like here the word of, they would prefer the word to. As a matter of fact, just out of curiosity's sake, let me pull up that old Bible software and look at, again, Galatians 2:7, and do a scripture comparison on that and see how the other translations handle this, and get it here where you can see it well. There we go. So Galatians 2:7. Here in the left is King James. Then we have NASB, contrary, seeing that I had been entrusted with the gospel to the uncircumcised, just as Peter to the circumcised. So they changed. The main thing we'll deal with right here is they take the of and make it to. ESV, of, and they make it to. The NIV, of, and they make it to. On the contrary, recognize that I had been entrusted with the task, look what they do, the task of preaching the gospel to the uncircumcised. This is a very good point, that all right dividers use the King James. If you're out there using the NIV, you would never become a right divider, because the NIV, let me just say it blunt, the NIV is not a Bible. The NIV is someone's twisting and changing and turning and perverting of a Bible, but it's not a Bible. A Bible interprets Greek in this case. And this is not an interpretation of Greek. The NIV is a committee of preachers putting together their own Bible. And that is a very different thing. You know, even if you reject right division, let's just check right here again, the NIV. This little phrase, let me highlight it, that I had been entrusted with the task of preaching the gospel to the uncircumcised. That really is materially different than, come back over here to the left, the King James, the gospel of the uncircumcision was committed to me. Now, if you are, let's pretend like you're one of the committee of preachers that does the NIV, and I'm not sure which version, because they keep getting a new, the NIV 84, the NIV 96, the NIV for today, the NIV, version 728, the NIV again, the NIV better, the NIV new, the NIV improved, blah, 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 blah. But let's suppose that the NIV, they're ready to do their copyright, and they get the lawyers in to, do all the stuff to protect their fake work there. And And then, they put it out to the publishers, here's the agreement. And the publishers paraphrase and interpret it to mean something legally, materially different. Would the NIV committee care? Oh, you bet they would care if their cha-ching was affected. But here, when the core of the gospel is affected, as long as it's readable, it's garbage. That is, the NIV is evangelical garbage. So let's go back. We haven't got to the core of Carlos's question, but here we do see that both NASB, ESV, and NIV is the worst offender here, completely just slaughtering the sentence, has changed so that you would never be a right divider using really NASB, ESV, or NIV. And so then with that, using the King James, you would say, the King James does say that there is a different gospel, come right here back to it, when they saw that the gospel of the uncircumcision was committed to me, as that of, or the gospel of, the circumcision was unto Peter. Two different things. We talked last night in our primetime version of Ask the Theologian about how it would be an interesting thing to take and lay those gospels side by side and see the vast difference that you get. One of us ought to do that. Now, we're going with the assumption, which I think has tons of textual credibility, even though every evangelical preacher would deny it outright, that Peter was preaching a different gospel. He was preaching the kingdom gospel. Maybe it would be better to say Paul was teaching a different gospel, because Paul's came later. So Paul was teaching a different gospel than Peter. Now, was Peter then under the curse of Paul? Here's the $1 million question from Conroe, Texas. Galatians chapter 1, verse 8. Now, we were in Galatians chapter 2, verse 7. Galatians chapter 1, verse 8, though we, or an angel from heaven, don't you think that right here we could include Peter in that? This is kind of very broad-based. We, or an angel of heaven, seems to me to be a figure of speech saying, it don't matter who it is. Though we, or an angel of heaven, preach any other gospel unto you than that which we have preached unto you, let him be accursed. But turns around the next chapter, says Peter's preaching a different gospel. So is he accursed? Is he saying, a curse be unto him? In fact, it goes on in verse 9 here, as we have said, now I say again, if any man preach any other gospel unto you than that ye have received, let him be accursed. I think the key phrase is right here, unto you. Notice he's got that both times in verse 8 and in verse 9. To the Galatians, if anyone preach any other gospel unto you. Now, for the Jewish people, they were those in, I don't think I've used my poster all week, they were those in this transition. To the Jewish people was given the gospel of the kingdom. To the Galatian people and other uncircumcised was given the gospel of grace. The Jewish people had a national gospel and an individual gospel. And so the Jewish people in this time of transition, because right now the Jewish people, today, 2022, today the Jewish people don't have a national gospel that's being offered. It'll come back after the rapture. But so I think that if Paul was speaking to the Corinthian synagogue, he wouldn't have said Galatians chapter 1 verses 8 and 9. But he wasn't preaching to a Jewish synagogue. He was preaching to a wholly and completely Gentile audience. And so anyone who comes in to preach that kingdom stuff to this Gentile audience, there he's clear, let him be accursed. But so there, I think it's interesting that he does have this. Let's go back to this unto you right here. Unto you, again in verse 9, any gospel unto you. Why didn't he say, if anyone preach another gospel, let him be accursed? That's the way we interpret it. But what it actually says is, if anyone preaches another gospel unto you. You know, I guess just out of curiosity, let's go to where is that comparison window here, and let's see what the NIV and these others do with it. Here we go. And so we're going to switch this to Galatians chapter 1, verse 8, again, unto you. So should, if we or anyone should preach to you, they kept that in there. Preaching to you, they kept it in there. ESV, to you. Preach to you, they kept to you in there. If anyone is preaching to you, they kept it in ESV. NIV, if we or an angel of heaven should preach a gospel other than the one which we have preached to you. Okay, so all of them did keep the to you in there. Good for them, because it's in there. But I would suspect, and this, I would say this is true if you go back to my notes in Galatians, I suspect, because until Carlos pulled this out, I don't know that I had thought of it. I would suspect that you would have a very hard time. In fact, I just put money down on it. Got my dollar here. I'd put money down on it that you do not have a commentary on the shelf that emphasizes unto you the gospel that I preached unto you, Galatians. And yet, the astute mind of the right dividing Pastor Carlos brings out that those become key words. I think there it is. Because I think you would say, would Paul say Peter is under the curse? Well, only, it said in that same book in Galatians chapter 2, where Paul comes and says, he doesn't use the word curse, but I cursed him to the face. In Galatians chapter 2, when Peter comes and is not consistent with the grace gospel unto you, Galatians. And he said, well, let's see what verse that is. When is it verse 9? Let's see. When James, Cephas, and John, who seemed to be pillars, perceived the grace that was given to me, they gave Barnabas, the right hand. I would remember the poor. When I saw they walked, verse 14, not uprightly according to the truth of the gospel, I said unto Peter before them all, if thou, being a Jew, livest after the manner of the Gentiles, not as do the Jews, why compellest the Gentiles to live as do the Jews, who are Jews by nature, and not sinners of the Gentiles, knowing that a man is not justified by works? He gets in here, I thought this was the one that talked about, I went right to his face. Maybe I'm mixing up a couple of passages here, but it looks like, even in this passage, Paul does come and, doesn't use the word a curse, but he kind of says, a pox be on you for not getting the right gospel to the Galatians. We agreed, what's supposed to go here. I think that's an excellent question, Carlos. And I think, again, the key is that phrase, unto you, in both verse 8 and verse 9. Excellent, thank you. Let me see here. I've got some duplicate questions that came in, had to filter through. Let's go to Bruce in cold Indiana. Did Paul preach more than one gospel? If so, as many claim, the gospel of God, the gospel of Christ, calling on the Lord, doesn't that make the two of them accursed? Very good point. I think you can build a case to say Paul did preach more than one gospel, which again, according to Galatians chapter 1, verse 8, let him be accursed if you drop the words unto you. Because I do think when you get to, say, Romans chapter 1, verses 1, 2, and 3, or 1 and 2, Paul comes and, he's called an apostle, separated unto the gospel of God, which he defines as promised afore by his prophets in the Holy Scriptures. I think that gospel of God is the kingdom gospel. I think David Reed did a program on this recently, and I think he came to the same conclusion. I didn't actually listen to the broadcast. I was on the run when that came, but I was reading some of the comments, and that made me determine that he had the same conclusion that I did. That the gospel of God, I don't think he used the words, but the gospel of God basically is the kingdom gospel. And my premise on the book of Romans is that Paul comes out of Acts 9 dedicated to being a vessel to the Gentiles, telling them about the kingdom message. But it is later that the gospel of grace is given unto him. And then when he is among Gentiles, that's the message that he preaches. But he defends in his trials in the book of Acts, he defends that he never preached that to the Jews. So I think, once again, we do a lot of, you could build a good case, and we never build a good case. We always just get things started here. But I think you could build a good case to say that Paul strongly defended the fact that he never gave in a Jewish setting the gospel of grace. When you read the charges against him by the Jews in the book of Acts, when he's standing before Agrippa and whatnot, he says, no, I taught them to do the things of Moses. I taught them the gospel of God. But on an individual basis, or even more so on a Gentile basis, I taught the gospel of grace. So I think, again, we have to take Galatians 1:8 and be very persnickety about it, that it does not just say, if anyone preach another gospel, let him be accursed. But it says to the Galatians, if anyone preach another gospel unto you, let him be accursed. And so that's those really are two very different things. It's almost like saying, I don't know, I'll make something up here, find a good illustration. If any of you drink a protein drink, let him be accursed. That would be a curse against, drinking any kind of protein drink. But if what I had actually said is, anybody who takes my protein drink that I brought for today, let him be accursed. That would be different. You can go get your own protein drink and you can drink it, but if anyone drinks mine, a curse be upon him and all who know him. So I think that's the difference that we've got there. So that doesn't put either Paul or Peter under the curse. But if you read it in the general way rather than in the persnickety way, the legal way, then you're exactly right. Both of them end up under a curse, which then, of course, makes, I don't know, what would you say, a contradiction within the Scripture. Thank you very much. Rudy in Lessines, Belgium. Again, last night, Rudy, as I was about to go to bed, I thought I should Google. It's not the best way to do things, but I should Google the history of Belgium. I am determined to know something of the history of Belgium. I am going to figure this out. Right now, I know nothing of the history of Belgium. And I still haven't even found the nursery rhyme that has something about the Belgium. What do you call a person from Belgium? Belgianians? I've struggled with this before, I think, and I think you've given me the answer. But we're coming to his question. But Deb just says, I just finished watching 8 sessions of The Virginian. I haven't watched that, but it keeps popping up in my, hey, you should watch this. I'm gonna check that out. I've been going back and forth between Laramie and the Wild Wild West. Neither one of them are really all that good. Once you've hit the Rifleman, it's hard. And let's see, Roger has recommended one to me. What was that? It's a well-known one. I'll think of it in a moment. But Deb says The Virginian. I may try that out. Okay, to the Belgian, Rudy. I got it. Thanks, Rudy. Would you give again a small summary of the different types of psalms, the 3 R's, if I remember, and give a little explanation of each type? Yes, I would be delighted to do so. And let me take a look and see if I can bring up a slide that might help us here. Take me just a second to bring this up from the Prophecy of the Psalms. I think I can get it fairly quickly. The Psalms graphically presented, and sorry, I'm hearing that little bit of static there. We're still trying to get that taken care of. Okay, where is what I'm looking for? Here we go. Let's see if I have a graphic that will help in this regard. May or may not. But here, I tell you what, let's look at a couple of things. This is not what you asked for. But the 3 interpretations that I give on the Psalms, the devotional interpretation, the historical interpretation, or the prophetic interpretation. The 3 R's would only come in this prophetic interpretation. The Psalms are a necessary ingredient to having an understanding of prophetic revelation. That is my position. And the 5 books of the Psalms, the reflection of the Psalms of the Pentateuch, the expectation of numerology. We won't get into that today, but that's some of the thing I was talking about a little bit earlier. This is the challenging stuff. Okay, here's the slide that I thought I had. And I have said the Psalms can be broken into 3 categories. Category number 1, Psalms of Revelation, in which a great truth is revealed. Number 2, Psalms of the remnant, which contain the feelings, sentiments, or experiences of the remnant toward this truth, or as a result of this truth. I was trying to see if I could get a pointer there. I can't much. Now, let me explain those 2, first of all, a little bit differently. The typical pattern, and there are some exceptions to this, but the typical pattern is you have a revelation, and then you have the remnant responding to the revelation. And dealing with that revelation. And then it will go into reign, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. But revelation, remnant, reign tends to be the pattern, the direction in which they go. There's the revelation, then there's the remnant. The remnant is typically the biggest chunk of it, and then reign. Revelation, remnant, reign. And with that, then you've got that pattern that goes, and it's almost a single revelation psalm, a bunch of remnant psalms, and then a few rain psalms. Let's go back to the slide. So psalms of revelation, psalms of remnant, and the third column, psalms of rain, the fulfillment of the truth in the messianic reign. If we were to look at this in, say, Psalm 1 through 8, I think Psalm 1 would be the revelation of the Messiah. Psalms 2 through 7, I'm going by memory here, Psalm 2 through 7 would be the remnant psalms, and Psalm 8 would be the rain psalms. Now, that is the typical pattern. It goes revelation, remnant, rain, revelation, remnant, rain, revelation, remnant, rain. But I think we probably would find some exceptions to that. But we would only find those three psalms: revelation, remnant, rain, that are given there. As a matter of fact, yeah, okay, I have this chart of Psalm 1 through 8, the counsels of God concerning man. And here you see Revelation Psalms. Okay, I put Psalm 1 and 2 as Revelation Psalms. Revelation 1, the incomparable. Revelation 2, Psalm 1, and Psalm 2, the victor. And then the day of rejection, Psalms 3 through 7, are those remnant psalms, followed by Psalm 8 as rain. Now, if you'll take that in your mind, here's the things you need to write down to work through this. You need to write revelation, remnant, rain. And then you need to, then I would say take Psalm 1 through 8, because it is a pretty easy category to take. Look at how Psalm 1 and 2 give revelation about the king and his kingdom. And then Psalms 3 through 7, they deal with this as the remnant, and it is a struggle. Psalm 3 through 7 are going to have a negative tone to them. And then Psalm 8 is going to come in a victorious reign. Now, if you work through those, that'll give you the ability then to start to look into other psalms and to go randomly into those other psalms and say, okay, is this revelation, remnant, or rain? Now, again, the vast majority are going to be remnant. And this is why the vast majority of the psalms are ignored. Let me back up here in our slides. Most of Christendom takes this devotional interpretation over here in the purple, where the Psalms are used for encouragement, chastisement, or praise. But a lot of Psalms don't make very good devotion. I mean, a lot of Psalms are just, cursed be the enemy, and, and his children too. So, begins to be a really, the devotional interpretation of Psalms is, let's dump most of them, and they'll take the revelation and the rain Psalms. That will be, but the majority aren't. The historical interpretation is, let's learn from the life and times of Israel, and there's certainly some benefit of that, but very few take the prophetic interpretation. I would even say among dispensationalists and right dividers, I think very few take the prophetic interpretation. And I think, and we talked about this the other day, and I've talked about it a number of occasions, I don't think I'm here on it. I might be, I'll talk arrogant here for a moment. I might be the world's living expert on the prophetic interpretation of the Psalms. And I don't know it very good. But the only reason I'm the world's expert on the prophetic interpretation of the Psalms is I'm the only person that takes a prophetic interpretation of the Psalms that's alive today. Others like F.W. Grant did this, and I'm sure there are some others out there, and they probably even do better than I do. But I put it into a book. That makes me the world expert. and yet I can't even explain it in a way that somebody can understand it. So we as in Christendom, and I think especially right dividers, there is a huge door of opportunity in Bible study in the Psalms if we could get there. And learning these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the positive meaning, the negative meaning, then, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, going through that, the 3 categories, there we go. Here is, in Psalm 9 through 15, there's not a revelation psalm. All of that is remnant psalms. In Psalm 16 through 41, we've got, I failed to label some of those, didn't I, as whether they were revelation or remnant in those first 2 sections there. And then I go into particular psalms that are given there. Those are all graphics that come out of the Psalms graphically presented. And if you're Belgian, I'll send you some electronic stuff. Just send me an email. That's an offer to the Belgians. The rest of you can go to dispensationalpublishing.com and get the Psalms graphically presented if you want to see those, or if you're really nice, or you just tell me you're Belgian. What do I know? Thanks, Rudy. Stephen down in balmy Gainesville, Florida, says, what does the land of the living mean used in many scriptures? One example is Psalm, pull this up here. One example is Psalm 116, verse 9. Incidentally, in my 2 volumes on the Psalms, I only made it to Psalm 70. So I walk before the Lord in the land of the living. I believe, therefore I have spoken. That's verse 9. Let's go up to verse 1 just to see if we can analyze Psalm 16 a little bit to nail that down a little bit, and then probably do a little research on the land of the living. And I should go ahead and bring part B of the question here, because it says, what are other options such as the valley of the shadow of death? Psalm 23:4. So let's put that in the back of our mind as we go through it. Now, back to Psalm 16. I love the Lord because he hath heard my voice and my supplications. There's the premise of the psalm. God has heard me. That from the very first verse, and I could be wrong, because sometimes you are wrong if you just go from the first verse. From the first verse, this sounds like a rain psalm. God has heard my voice. He's heard my supplications. He's answered my prayer. He is reigning with me. Let's take that premise. This is a rain. Verse number 2 is going to witness for it or witness against it. And so verse number 2, because he hath inclined his ear to me, therefore I will call upon him as long as I live. Okay, this witnesses for it. The sorrows of death compassed me, and the pains of hell gat hold upon me. I found trouble and sorrow. That's all past tense. Then called I upon the name of the Lord. O Lord, beseech thee, deliver my soul. Gracious, this is verse 5, and verse 5 is often the Lord's presence and the Lord's grace. Gracious is the Lord and righteous, yea, O God, O our God is merciful. The Lord preserveth the simple. I was brought low, he helped me. Again, I think this sounds like a rain psalm to me. Return to thy rest, O my soul, for the Lord hath dealt bountifully with thee. Thou hast delivered my soul from death, mine eyes from the tears, and my feet from the falling. Now let's just stop right there, and well, we don't have to stop right there. The next verse is verse 9. I will walk before the Lord in the land of the living. Could we, just from this psalm, make an assumption? Well, of course we could make an assumption that we can question. The assumption only from this psalm is that the land of the living sounds to me like the millennium. Now, I probably wouldn't have gotten that if I hadn't already known the pattern of the Psalms and known that this is, that they are prophetic, and put the Psalms completely after the rapture, not applying them devotionally or even historically, applying them prophetically, saying, okay, this is all a good thing. The land of the living has got to be the millennium. That's our assumption. And I think the way to learn is you make an assumption and then you test it. That's the scientific method. So there's our hypothesis, if you want to call it a little more what they would call it in that regard. And then let me do a search here for, I'm going to put in quotes, land of the living, close quote. And bring this up here. So we've got quite a few, 15 times it comes up. There it is. Job 28:13. Man knoweth not the price thereof, neither is found in the land of the living. Job, you know, one of my principles is to go with the easiest first. Job is never the easiest. So that's the first time. And the first use, we would want to look at that, but for the sake of our time today, we're going to look for something easier. We got quite a few, well, I say quite a few, 4 or 5 Psalm, 27:13. I had fainted unless I had believed to see the goodness of the Lord in the millennium. Let's try to read these as in the millennium. Psalm 52. God shall likewise destroy thee forever. He shall take thee away and pluck thee out of thy dwelling place and root thee out of the millennium. Now, probably in context, we could take that to say, hey, you guys aren't going to make it to the millennium. Psalm 116, we looked at that. Psalm 142:5, I cried unto thee, O Lord, I said, thou art my refuge and my portion in the millennium. Isaiah 38:11, I said, I shall not see the Lord, even the Lord, in the millennium, in the coming kingdom. I shall behold no man. Okay, so here's a wailing, a lament. 53:8, he was taken from prison and from judgment, and who shall declare his generation? He was cut off from the millennium. For the transgressions of my people he was stricken. Now that's, okay, that throws a wrench in the soup. Because Isaiah 53 is messianic. He, the Messiah, was cut off out of his own millennium, his own kingdom. Can't say that. He was cut off out of the land of the living for the transgression of my people. He was stricken. That one seems fairly simple. If you're looking for a simple one, that seems to say, you know, you got the world of the living and the world of the dead. So whereas the Psalms here seem to say the millennium, that was a very quick look at those 5 Psalms, but you could read the Psalms, the millennium, and not run into a problem. Isaiah doesn't seem to work. Let's go back and try a couple more. Jeremiah. I was like a lamb or an ox that is brought to slaughter. I knew not that they had devised devices against me, saying, let us destroy the tree with the fruit thereof, and let us cut him off from the land of the living, that his name may be no more remembered. That, I don't know the context, whether that's messianic or not, but that sounds more like living versus dead. Let's look at Ezekiel. They stop in chapter 32, and it's chapter 40 that starts talking about the millennium. Let's just take the first one in chapter 32, because there's quite a few here. Whose graves are set on the side of the pit, and her company is round about the grave, all of them slain, fallen by the sword, which caused terror in the land of the living. That can't be the millennium. Not terror in the land of in the millennium. So maybe we could maybe we could build an argument to say in the Psalms, because they're prophetic, it refers to the millennium, but the rest of the time it's the opposite of the valley of the shadow of death or the world of the dead or Sheol. If you're maybe, I think outside of the Psalm, you could build the case to say, when you leave the land of the living, you go to Sheol. Now, once again, when we take that in, let's say, the Psalms, I will walk before the Lord in the land of the living, possibly a remnant psalm to say, I am going to make it through here. My king is going to come and I'm not going to die. So could we go back and rethink our assumption and say in the Psalms, it's the millennium, but from the perspective of the remnant who's not going to die, they're not going to the world of the dead. They're going to survive the tribulation. That's probably a better case. Once again, that would be worthy of a little bit of interpretation, a little bit of study. Write a little paper on it, a little booklet, something like that, The Land of the Living. Excellent. I notice Cliff mentioned here that the word gat, this was not a question, but I see the comment, gat, we had that in one of the verses we were on, gat appears in the King James 20 times, while got appears 7 times. I am wondering what the difference between gat and got is. I suspect there is the possibility that for the King James ear it just sounded better to say I gat rather than I got. But it might be that is actually a different form, a different tense of the verb. So I have opened up on the Oxford English Dictionary right here, gat. It's not a noun, it's a verb. So we're going to go down here to the verb. Okay, it sends us to get, past tense, got, archaic gat. Okay, past participle got. It would be interesting, here again, yet another study. Of the 7 times that got appears, is it a participle? And they're separating past tense from past participle. You know, King James is very precise in its language, so that is a possibility. I don't know that it's true because it also looks like it could just be, say it this way, say it that way. You have tomatoes, I have tomatoes. And it just depends on, how things are sounding there through that. So that is a possibility there. That's an interesting one. Let's take this last question. I'm going to come in to think about this. Here's the last question of the year. Because next week I will not be broadcasting. And so this is the last Ask the Theologian of the year. I've got my Merry Christmas tie on, if you can read the print. And I'll be off next week. And so we won't be taking questions again until 2023. Robert in Holly Springs gets the last question of the year. Why do some churches say that the book of Acts is ongoing or still being written? Can you weigh in on this? Yes, I can. And I just want to pull up that phrase, the book of Acts is still being written. and I braved it here. The book of Acts is still being written, Help of the Heart, Christian something or another. The book of Acts is still being written, Christian Life Tabernacle. So we've got, yeah, those two right there. Let's just give the winner to the one that comes up on the top. The book of Acts is still being written. It's not an uncommon saying or phrase, especially in evangelical garbage churches. And so here we have, I'm gonna bring this up to size here a little bit, some sort of picture there that was being blocked out. We've heard so many beautiful stories when we were kids, listening to the adventures of these great people. I'm not sure. This must be a missionary kind of thing. And yeah, speaking of missions, okay. And so basically, I'm sure if we were to read that, their premise would be, you know, the missionary ventures are still going out. And so we're in Acts 29, Acts there. As a matter of fact, there is a movement called Acts 29, right? There's only 28 chapters in the Bible. But if, I'm sure if we just look up Acts 29, yeah, there it is, home, Acts 29 right there. Churches planting churches. We could watch the video there and see, but let's see. About. Let's click the about on Acts 29. Pretty strong Calvinist movement. Acts 29 stands in the tradition of historical evangelical confessionalism, that is, covenant theology. We affirm the Lausanne Covenant and are committed to the following 5 theological distinctives: the gospel centrality, the sovereign grace of God in saving sinners, that means we're Calvinist; the work of the Holy Spirit for the life of ministry, that means we're charismatic; the equality of men and women and the principles of male servant leadership, that means we're woke; the local church as God's primary mission strategy, that means we read that in another pamphlet and wanted to put it here. So Acts 29 is the same concept. You know, the book of Acts is still being written. Here's the major flaw that brings about this kind of thinking. The root of it all is an assumption. And they have made the assumption that the book of Acts is the history of the church. And it must just be the first part of the history. And we continue the history. So it's like saying, you know, the history books of the United States are still being written. Yeah. I don't know how much longer, but yeah. Because our history's not over with. But is the book of Acts the history of the early church? I would say it's not. I would say the book of Acts is the revelation of the transition. In fact, that's what I have on the poster right here. God's revelation of transition between the kingdom gospel and the grace gospel. And so the book of Acts is not a historical book. It is a theological premise, a theological dispensational premise. So if you take it as a theological dispensational premise, then you wouldn't ever say it's still being written. You would never say Acts 29. You kind of wonder what Acts 29 people, or those who, you know, the book of Acts is still being written. Well, what do you do with, you know, do not add to the book? And you know, the problem is, again, the problem is they've just made a bad assumption. And I have noticed that, it's probably why we have it on the mugs, every theological flaw comes from a bad assumption. I've got I don't know that friend should be the word. I think it was a mistake. I've heard other people say this is not original to me. It was a mistake that we started calling Facebook connections friends. You know, they're my friend on Facebook. Some of them I wouldn't even recognize if they came in the door, you know. Shouldn't really call them friends. It sort of discounts the word friend, but you know what I mean anyway, a friend on Facebook, who's recently gone very charismatic. And I've interacted with him just about that. I've really kind of thrown my stuff in. I've turned off notifications on Facebook. So unless I think to go back and look at something, I don't see it. I decided I didn't want my life to spin around Facebook. So I post when I get bored every now and then. I go on there, I'll see something that somebody put, I'll respond to it. But then I never follow up, rarely follow up. My bad. But anyway, he's gone uber charismatic recently. And I told him, you've made a bad assumption about the kingdom. Because all charismatic theology is kingdom theology. And he's made a bad assumption, this Facebook acquaintance of mine. Getting them to question that assumption, that's tough. You know, what if I went to, what if they invited me as an unwelcome guest to speak at the Acts 29 conference and said, we want you to say everything, you wrote a book called Evangelical Garbage, we want you to put it out there and tell us where our garbage is. And I said, it starts with your title. There is no Acts 29. The Word of God is complete, the Word of God is done. Finished. And you made the assumption that Acts is still being written today. That's a dumb assumption. Let me tell you what Acts is really about. I doubt they would accept the premise. You get so deep into your assumptions that you can't question them. Until, like you and I, we've trained ourselves to keep questioning the assumptions. And once you train yourself to discernment, then you get there. So train yourselves to discernment. Thanks, Robert, for helping us close out 2022 in our Ask the Theologian. We do still have 2 more broadcasts in 2022, and that is the Christmas Eve service, 5 p.m. on December the 24th. That's tomorrow. And the Christmas Day service at 10:30 a.m. on December the 25th. That is Sunday. And if you can join us for either one of those, it'll be a blessing. If you're joining us on Christmas Eve, bring a candle with you. And we'll have a wonderful time. Thank you, each one of you, for a great year of Ask the Theologian. I should go through, see how many we added this year. I don't know how many we added. Today is number 288 since we started putting them on Worshipify. But anyway, I don't know what date that was and which ones got skipped and all that kind of stuff. But we've done a bunch. We've answered a bunch of questions this year, haven't we? And it's been fun. And so thank you very much, from Taos, New Mexico to across America and around the world. Very glad to have you, London and Belgium and Netherlands and Australia and Canada and wherever it is you might be from. Coast to coast, you're a blessing. Merry Christmas to you. Look forward to seeing you soon. We'll chat again next year. We'll have a 10:45 January 1st broadcast as well, and then get back in our regular broadcasting on the 2nd of January. So until then, thanks. Be safe. Stay warm. God bless you. Happy New Year and Merry Christmas.